Hey, Vlad here, devinsidey.com. Welcome to another video. A while ago, I made a video about ScalaFix, a refactoring and linting tool for Scala. One of the cool things about it is that it is open for extension, and so one of the relatively recent additions to it is the so-called organize import ScalaFix rule written by Cheng Lian. This rule is not bulletproof, but it is good enough to have been included in Metals, and so you can use it right out of the box without tinkering with ScalaFix. Let's take it for a spin. As in most of my videos, I'm on Windows and I'm running WSL2 with Ubuntu 20.04 inside of it. I'm also using a virtual desktops feature of Windows, which comes with shortcuts that allow me to easily switch between virtual desktops like this and then back to Ubuntu like that. Now, usually we will start playing around by using one of my Jitteray templates, and we will a bit later in the video. But for now, I just want to create an empty directory to show you that you can use this rule without tinkering with ScalaFix, without having to install it or anything like that. All right, so I'm just going to go into my dev folder, which is currently empty, and so I'm going to create a directory playground. Okay, and I'm just going to launch it with Visual Studio Code. There we go. So all we need to do is we need to create a build.spt file so that Metals wakes up. I have a video about the Metals extension. This is pretty much the only extension that we need for this video. I'm sure that you're familiar with it as of right now. I'm actually planning to refresh it because a lot of things have changed. As we can see, Metals just woke up, but let's not import it as of right now. Now, by default, SBT uses the Scala version that SBT itself was written in, which is 2.12.2. There's already 2.12.13 out and also 2.13.5 out, and we're going to use both of them, and you're going to see why in just a second. So we're going to start by manually specifying 2.12.13. All right, so now we will also create scalafmt.conf because the way my VS Code is set up that it always formats the stuff when I save the file, and so it forced me to create the .scalafmt.conf. In fact, the latest version is actually 2.7.5, and I have no idea what this rendering issue is. Okay, while it imports, let's actually go and create a file. So we're going to go and create source main Scala dev inside you playground main dot Scala like this, and I prefer to structure my packages like this. And by the way, I'm gonna say something about this in the end of the video because I'm being constantly asked about this, why I prefer to structure my packages like this. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna start with a couple of imports, and these imports are going to come from our stuff. So we're gonna go and create a little bit more space over here, and I'm gonna go and create a new file over here. It's gonna be sub foo.scala. Again, I prefer to like this and like that. Okay, so inside of it, we're simply going to have case subject foo1, and a bit later we're going to use foo2. All right, these two objects. Okay, so now over here we can go and we can import it. Import sub dot foo.1, and by the way, this is also part of the reason why I'm doing it like this, is because sub is not visible because I'm structuring my imports like this. I have no idea what this is. In fact, let me close it and reopen it like this. It's probably worrying me because there's no class or trait or an object in this file. Okay, so we're gonna have something that we're not using, which is abstract method error like this. Okay, so now we're gonna do object main extends app. All right, and we're going to print line, my favorite hyphens, 2500, and we're going to do times 50, 50. We're going to do it like this, and we're also going to have a print line, hello world, like this. Okay, maybe we should also run it. So let's go and do SBT like this. And by the way, we should probably not print line hello world. We should probably print line foo1, which is also the reason why I created it. All right, let's just go and run it real quick like this. We don't need so much space. In fact, we don't even need to run it for today's video. All right, so as you can see, we don't have ScalaFix installed or configured or anything like this. But if we go to the command palette, we can type in organize imports. We could click it over here, or we could simply right click anywhere in the file and we can go to a source action, and the only source action available is organize import. And as you can see, there is also a shortcut available, and if you're somebody who's using Alt Shift to switch between language layouts, you might be careful about this. Okay, so let's do Alt Shift O, and as you can see, it's sorted the imports differently. I'm going to show you the default configuration a bit later in the video. Let me also copy one of my hyphens like this and put it like that. Okay, now it looks much better. Now, as you can see, it did not remove the unused import, this one. In fact, let me do it like this and like that. okay, because I want to be able to revert it like this. Okay, so as you can see, it did not remove this unused import, and it's because all these Scala, all of these Scala meta tools, Scala Fix, Scala FMT, and Metals itself, they work in such a way that they can only do stuff that they can only react to the information that the Scala compiler is providing. And so something needs to tell us that this is an unused import, and then Scala Fix will be able to see it. And so we need to open the build file, and this is also the reason why I'm using 212s over here, because the flag that we need actually changed between 212 and 213. Okay, so the one that we need is -y warn -unused -import. All right, like this. Yes, please import the changes. Let's not have this pop up over here. Let's also press enter over here, and maybe we should also do this one. I really like this one, this setting over here. We're gonna go to build, I'm gonna include it over here. Like this way SBT will automatically reload stuff. Okay, so I'm gonna shut it down, start it, and run the main, which is like this. Come on, there we go, running the main. All right, so as you can see, now we are getting the unused import information. So now we can do Alt-Shift-O, and it is removed. Okay, and if well, maybe it would have been more clear that it still also sorts them like this. So like this, it is removed. All right, let's go back over here. Okay, so now we can switch to Scala 2.13.5 so that I can show you how the flag changed. And this is 2.13.5. And by the way, hopefully that by the time you're watching this, Scala 2.13 is already out. Okay, as of right now, Scala Fix does not really work with Scala 13. Scala 3, I mean. Like this. Okay, so this is how the new flag looks like. And now we actually need to import the build. All right, it seems like it woke up, and ta-da, same deal. All right, one of the cool things about it is, and I was actually surprised that it actually works, is that if you add fatal warnings, fatal errors, well, the flag is actually called fatal warnings, but so this flag actually converts warnings into errors, as you can see down there. But somehow magically it still works. Okay, so this is now an error. Like usually these tools, these Scala meta tools like Scala Fix, Scala FMT, and Metals, they work better when things are already compiled. But this one clearly doesn't compile, and so I'm gonna click it, and still somehow magically it removed it, which is really fascinating. Okay, I'm actually gonna go back and remove this flag. I'm gonna remove it from over here. There we go. Okay, import the build. Now you can also configure the rule again without installing Scala Fix, but you still need to create a .scalafix.conf file. Okay, and I'm going to show you the default configuration that I already have prepared over here. All the links are going to be down in the description. Actually, don't like you. Go, stay over there. Man, I hate it that it pops up like this. So I'm going to have it like this. I also zoomed it in so that you guys can see it better. Okay, so we're just going to copy that. I'm going to paste it over here, and I already know that it's going to die because it has this null over here, so I'm going to simply replace it with a 1 like this. Okay, we're going to go through these settings in just a second. Okay, so now if I go over here and I'm going to press this, and it still works. So this particular configuration that I just changed, called coalesce to wildcard import threshold, is essentially when you have multiple explicit imports, at which point it should collapse them to wildcard imports. And I configured it to 1, which means you can have only one explicit import. As soon as you have a second one, it's going to collapse it to a wildcard import, which is the ._, or in Scala 3 it's going to be .*. And for this one, we're also going to need to fix a couple of these. So this one, expand relative, it's going to be the true. This is also why I'm using the relative import over here, which is just sub.foo.1. So it will rewrite it to com.dev inside u.playground.sub.foo.1. And we also need to make sure that we group imports. Okay, so explode means if you have a wildcard import, it will actually, I'm sorry, probably not a wildcard import, but if you have like multiple imports in the same line, like if you import com.dev inside you playground sub foo.1 comma foo.2, it would actually explode them into 2 separate lines. The other options are keep, obvious. There is also merge, and there is also aggressive merge. Okay, so aggressive merge is the one that I prefer because it's producing less diffs in general with all of these settings. Don't go overboard with them. This is what I recommend. Try to pick the settings that will minimize your diffs. Okay, so aggressive merge will always go to the wildcard imports pretty much right away, which in Scala can sometimes cause issues because the import semantics can get like very complicated. If you're running into issues, then replace it with merge. If not, like I recommend to stick to the aggressive merge. Okay, so now we change like these three ones, like this one and this one and this one. Now if we go over here, and I'm going to use foo2 as well over here, like this and like this. All right, and now I'm going to press Alt-Shift-O, and it's going to look like this. Okay, so it removed the unused import, it exploded the relative import into the I guess it's called absolute import, and it also used the wildcard over here because it was 2. Okay, and if it had been 2 over here, then it would have done this. Okay, which I don't really like. So let's go back and change it to 1 like this. Now you can go through all these settings at your own pace. The documentation is really great. Just beware that this rule is not bulletproof, and so sometimes you might get unexpected results unless you RTFM. For instance, one of the things that the README is being very clear about is that Scala Fix itself already has a built-in way to remove unused things. And one of those things is imports. So if you're using the organize imports rule, you should definitely disable the one that comes with Scala Fix. There is also a way to configure the rule that comes from Scala Fix in such a way that it still removes the other unused things, just not the imports. The same thing applies to sorting imports. Scala Fix can already sort things for you out of the box, but if you're using the organize imports rule, then you should not use the built-in one from Scala Fix. All right, now if you've been watching my videos for a while, then you know that a while ago I created a Jitterbit template to set up a very basic Scala Seed Hello World project. Now, even though I made a Scala Fix video like 1.5 years ago, I did not include Scala Fix into that template because it was a bit rough around the edges. And now this organize imports rule pushed me over the edge, and so I included it. And so what we're going to do now is we're going to close this project. We're going to create a new project based on my template. Also, we're going to go to GitHub and we're going to go through my change so that you can see exactly how I added. Because over there I configured Scala Fix, I added a bunch of rules, I made sure that SPT works fine and dandy with it. So let's close this one. Let's go and remove the playground, and let's do this. That will create an empty project, and we're still gonna call it playground. We don't really have to, but we will. I'm not sure why it takes forever right now. Maybe this is something with my internet. All right, so we're just gonna do code playground. It'll look very similar. It's a simple Hello World project with a bunch of settings already. You know, it's kind of simple, but you know, it's really it's configured in a very opinionated way. All right, so while it imports, let's actually go and take a look at my change set that I have it open over here. All the links are going to be down in the description. As you can see, I changed 8 files. The first thing that I did is I gave it a bit more memory. According to the Scala Fix documentation, some of the rules require a bit more memory. Okay, so I'm going to collapse this. In fact, can I create a bit more space like this? All right, so this is the scalafix.conf, and these are all the rules that I'm going to be using. We didn't need it before because we were not using it through SPT, but now we actually will need it. Okay, now these are all the rules, and most of them don't need to be published against the very exact binary Scala version. There's one of them, which is the explicit result types, which will add explicit result types to public and protected things. As you can see, it can be configured, like each rule can be configured over here. So it is going to add explicit result types, and this particular rule needs to be published against exactly the Scala binary version. In fact, Scala 2.13.5 came out like a week ago, and Scala Fix was updated to, updated this rule only yesterday. Okay, so these are all the rules that I'm using. Explicit result types, linking implicit class vals. This is when you have an extension class like implicit class, blah blah blah, and then inside of it you have a val something, and you do extends any val, which by the way forces you to do this to create this val. It is a convention to make them private so that it doesn't leak outside. So it's gonna make it private. No val and for comprehension. That one is self-explanatory. Organize imports, obviously. Procedure syntax, so if you're leaving out the equal sign, it's going to rewrite it. And then remove unused. We're gonna still use this one, but at the bottom we're going to configure it to not remove the unused imports, but we still want to import like all of these. Okay, now the configuration for my rules, like this one is pretty much copy pasted from the documentation. In fact, if you go over here to ScalaFix, you go to user guide, these are all of the rules, and this is the explicit result types. So this is pretty much how you can configure it. I changed only a few things. Pretty much this one, rewrite structural types to name classes. I changed it to false. I haven't seen it in action, but I feel like it's going to be a very big rewrite, and I don't want it to be automated for me. And the one thing that no, I think this is also the default fatal warnings. Basically, sometimes ScalaFix cannot figure out the type, and then it's just going to die silently if it's configured like this. All right, now organize imports, I changed actually quite a lot. Like this one we have already seen. And this one will look at your configured groups, and it will automatically add empty lines between your groups. If you set it to manual, then you can manually insert I believe it's like 3 or 4 hyphens. You can consult the documentation about this. I believe if you search for hyphen yeah, I believe it's this. Yeah, so this is how you would do it. If it's manual, you could manually insert them. This one is actually an important one. Group explicitly, imported implicits separately. Sometimes you get compilation errors if you, like, for example, it's very typical to start with like Java and Scala, but then if you have something like Scala concurrent execution context implicit global, right, it's technically a Scala import, but it's an implicit, and sometimes it causes issues. And so if you set this one to true, then you're gonna less likely run into the situations where your code is not going to compile. But what will happen is that you will have the Scala group at the top, and it will have another group at the very bottom where it will have the implicit imports. You're going to have explicit imports for the implicits. It's kind of hard to explain. Okay, grouped imports, aggressive merge, already talked about it. Now this is how I prefer to have my groups. I don't believe that there is any convention about this, and so this is just my personal preference, just personal taste. So Java imports first, or Java X imports first, then the Scala imports. And by the way, you can see that you can use regexes, or you can use the regular, just basically just text. Just make sure that if you're using text, include the dot at the very end. Then everything else. And by the way, I wish that it would still, I wish that there was still a setting to allow it to still have empty lines, right? So for example, if you have an import to cats and if you have an import to Monix, I would like to have them, still be grouped and alphabetically sorted and stuff, but I would like them to have an empty line. As of right now, it's not possible. And then we have this thing. It looks very, very weird because this is a generate template, but essentially it's the package that you choose when you create the template. Okay, so when we were creating it, the package was ComDev inside you, which is why it went over here and it put it in there. Okay, ComDev inside you, and then it put a dot in there. Okay, it just said in the change set it looks like this, but essentially you see it's a package formatted with lowercase package syntax, and then there is a dot in the end. These are self-explanatory. Import select this order and import order ASCII. I believe the other options are I don't know, like symbols first or something like this, but ASCII kind of makes sense. Preset, there are 2 presets. The default one, which is basically the one that I copy pasted and then started changing, and there's also the one that that is used by default for IntelliJ. I'm not an IntelliJ user, so I have no idea how IntelliJ does it, right? So there's default and there's IntelliJ, and I believe if you search for IntelliJ somewhere, here. So it's either default or IntelliJ 223, whatever that means. I guess it's March 220. Let's go back to the change. I remove unused. Okay, you can also disable it, right? If you want to prefer the the one for ScalaFix, but it is not recommended. It's better to have it like this. All right. What else do we have? And by the way, I should probably start collapsing these guys like this one. All right. So in .scalafmt.conf, I made sure that we don't sort the imports because this rule is going to do it for me. Let's collapse this guy. I added a couple of aliases. One is style check and the other one is style fix. If you run style check, it will run all of these guys: scalafmt sbt check, scalafmt check all, and scalafix all check. I'm not sure why. I couldn't find a way for scalafix to actually mess around with my sbt files, either to check them or to fix them. If you know this, then please feel free to let me know in the comments below. This one, style fix, it runs ScalaFix first, then it runs ScalaFMT for SBT, and then ScalaFMT for all. And by the way, there is a tiny issue that I'm going to show you in just a couple of seconds. Somehow, if you don't compile your test sources before you run any of these rules, for some reason, they will compile the test sources for you, but they will forget that they did it. And so if you run it again, it will start compiling the test sources again. We're going to see it in just a couple of seconds. All right, what else? Let me collapse this guy. So I have a file called dependencies.scala. This is just a catalog of all the dependencies, okay? And I'm using them in my build.sbt. Okay, this is how I use them, like the compiler plugins or these guys over here. And so in the I have a separate file called scalafix.sbt. In there, I'm using it. Okay, so this is the next thing we're going to see. So this one introduces it, and this one over here uses it. Okay, now obviously I'm also adding this SBT ScalaFix plugin so that I can run ScalaFix on all of my files through SBT. And these are a bunch of settings that are required for ScalaFix, right? So the ScalaFix Scala binary version is the one that is the binary version for your project. These are the dependencies, adding this extra rule. We're enabling semantic DB so that it can read out the information. And we're also making sure that the semantic DB version is the one that ScalaFix is also using. Okay, and so with this, the only change that it actually did was for my test suite, and this is exactly what I was talking about, that I prefer to have like empty lines over here, but ScalaFix cannot do this for now, like this organize import rule. I cannot do this for now. Maybe this feature will come in the future, and whatever. I turned my OCD off for this one, and I'm fine with it. Okay, so now like these empty lines are removed. Let me show it to you over here. So this is how it looks like, before I had the empty line over here, empty line over here, and I didn't even have this one. Okay, all right. And so I also have this import so that like these lines would be a bit shorter, because now I was forced to use explicit types, and I did not use them over here, and so it got longer, and so I did this so that it becomes shorter. Okay, so this is it. So we went through the whole change set. The link is going to be down in the description, and you can use my template to adapt stuff to your needs. Let's go back to the project. Let's also start SBT real quick. Let's go over here as well and create a bit more space, right? I recently changed this thing to use fancy Unicode, drawing characters. I believe they are called box drawing characters. All right, so as you can see, I added these two aliases, and this is what I was talking about, right? So style check is going to run like all of these things. So if you're going to run style check, nothing is compiled right now, okay? So it's going to compile the sources, and then it's going to compile the test sources, okay? But then if I'm going to run again, somehow it's going to forget that it actually compiled the test sources. In fact, let me create a bit more space. Okay, so as you can see over here, it compiled the regular sources and the test sources. I'm going to run it again. Somehow it still compiles the test sources. Same thing for StyleFix, right? StyleFix, right? StyleFix like this, compiles the test sources. Going to run it again, still compiles the test sources. Okay, however, if you compile them yourself, right, like this, now they will stay compiled. Okay, so if I'm going to do a style check now, it's going to be fine. As you can see, it didn't compile anything. And style fix, the same thing. It just ran real quick and it didn't have to recompile anything. So now it's all good. Let's also run the tests, right, like this, and also run the application like this. And also I have a Revolver built in, so we can also run it through Revolver like this. All right, now let me mention a couple of things before I leave. Somehow I saw the organize import rule used via metals behave differently from when it was used in SBT. I couldn't reproduce it though, so yeah, let's hope that it doesn't happen again. Another thing is that if you have seen my video about ScalaFix from 1.5 years ago, then you might know that ScalaFix actually has a CLI, and I have it installed, right? So if I do a ScalaFix version, and we're going to see that I'm also using 0926, which is exactly the one that I'm using over here, 0926. Okay. However, getting the CLI to work is a bit tricky because, it doesn't know about this rule, for example, right? So if you do like ScalaFix, then it's going to say, hey, I don't know the rule, right? There's a way to add the rule, okay? But still, like, if we go to scalafix.conf, and even if we disable this rule, you're gonna have like the next issue, which is like, hey, let me know that you're using like these guys. And so the incantation got so long that I just gave up. I'm just gonna keep using it straight from SBT. Okay, if for your use case you still want to use this one, because technically it should be faster because it's a native image and stuff. So in fact, I'm not sure about ScalaFix. I think Scala FMT has a native image. I think ScalaFix does not have a native image. I'm not sure. All right, so this is pretty much all I have for you today. Just let me add some extra to this video. As I already mentioned, I'm being constantly asked about this, why I'm using this. There are several reasons. One is that it is convenient. The difference is between the regular imports and this one is that the stuff from com.dev inside is already imported. As you can see, as you remember, like from before, we could start writing sub.foo.1. Right now we don't have it. Okay, so this is convenient. The second thing is very, very important. It is consistent with all the rest, right? So if you have vals, nested vals, nested defs, nested classes, nested objects, nested traits, the scoping rules behave exactly the same as they can work for packages, right? So by default, like this is just a syntactic sugar for this, right? Like this and like this. This is how namespaces are done in C#, for example. Okay, let's actually go back to SBT, or in fact, I can run it over here. Right, so as you can see, it runs exactly the same as before. I can also run it through SBT real quick. Like this. Okay, so it runs exactly as before. Once it finishes compiling, it's one file. There we go. Okay, so this is just a syntactic sugar. Okay, and so therefore I can go and I can print line something like com.dev inside you .playground .main. Why? Because it's inside, right? And they can do the same thing with playground, right? So it's consistent with all the other scopes. And the only reason why we're not using it, why it's not a sort of like a default, is just because we're used to how imports are used in languages like Java, right? This is the only reason. Okay, now with this there comes some caveat, because the default scoping rules mean that if there is something over here which is private val x, if it's well, it's a package. Okay, so you cannot have a val over here, right? So let's have a private object x. Okay, and if we make it private to to the package, which is the default, right? You can still have access to it, right? So over here you can still have access. So you can sort of like, it kind of feels like you're hijacking something, right? It's package private, but now you're underneath, but you're still in the same package, right? You're in the child package, sort of like, we're sort of like in XML now. Okay, make sure we reverse all of that stuff. Now, one of the most important reasons is it's a bit controversial, is that it actually encourages me to have less name conflicts. And this is the thing that I have been arguing with a bunch of people. See, the packages were created so that you can work around name conflicts created by your dependencies, right? So you have like other companies, other libraries, you bring them in. Obviously, in some situations, there will be name conflicts. Okay, and so it is perfectly fine to have your own namespaces, which is why we have this convention to use the reverse subdomain like com.dev inside you, for example, right? However, in your own projects, you should not have name conflicts. You should not abuse packages to resolve, your issues, yeah, and so when I'm using this, especially if you're using this since the beginning of the project, it will pretty much enforce that you're going to have less name conflicts, right? Because it's going to be it's going to be easier to produce name conflicts, because now everything is sort of like mashed. It sort of feels like a cake pattern, right? Everything is like mashed into the same namespace, and so it will happen. It will not compile. It will force you to change the name. Okay, that was a very, very long tangent. All right, one of the popular requests for ScalaFix and for organizing imports and all the other things is to run them on compile. Now, I don't recommend you to do this, but you can. So if we were to go to ScalaFix.sbt, okay, we could have this guy, right? This build ScalaFix on compile. True, we're not going to import it over here. And so if we go over here and I'm going to import something like import what is it, java lang dot I don't know, abstract method error, for example. I'm going to save the file. SBT is going to remove it, and now it's going to look like this. I'm going to save the file again, so now it's going to look fine. I don't recommend you to use it, so I'm going to remove it real quick like this. All right, let's actually go back to that. Okay, now there's a hacky way to also do this through VS Code, and I'm going to show it to you just for fun because this is YouTube after all. There's a plugin called Multi-Command. This one, Multi-Command, like this, by Ryuta46. Okay, and the way it works is that you can go to your settings, right? So I'm going to open the settings JSON, and at the bottom I'm already using it. So you go like this, you go multiple commands, and you have an array, and I already have one. We're going to take a look at it actually a bit later, and I'm going to have a comma, and I'm going to insert this over here. Okay, so this is a very hacky way. Basically, I'm creating a command on my own, right? I'm calling it scalafix on save, and I'm running the save action a bunch of times because, you know, it feels kind of like, you know, like we need a thread.sleep here, like back in the day. Then we're going to organize the import, and then we're going to save the file a bunch of times again. Okay, so now all I need to do is I need to bind it to a key. So we're going to go to keyboard shortcuts, and we're going to go to file save, which is this one, and I'm going to right click and I'm going to say remove key binding. Okay, and so now I need to find this one, scalafix on save. Okay, so I'm going to find it. There we go. I'm going to assign a key binding, which is Control S, and does not allow me to do this. Why? Because what? One existing command has it. Okay, whatever. Remove key binding. All right, let's go here. Control S, enter. There we go. Okay, so now if I have this guy over here, I'm going to save the file, and it's going to save it a bunch of times. It's going to remove the imports. I'm going to save it again. As you can see, this time, like these 10 things were not enough. Okay, let's try again. Okay, this time it was enough. Okay, so again, I have it over here. The file is not saved. I'm saving the file and I'm waiting, and it's removed, and it saved the file a couple of times. It's very, very hacky. I don't recommend that you guys do this. I'm going to show it over here again so that you can have it. But again, I don't recommend that you guys use this. All right, let me actually remove it. Remove it. And let's find the keyboard shortcut. I'm going to remove this one. I'm going to find file save, and I'm going to do over here, I'm going to say reset key binding, and there we go. All right, so I already have something prepared for you, which is a little bit of code over here. Just going to put it right here. Okay, now Metals came with cool features recently, relatively recently. If you go to the extension settings, if you go to the bottom, you're going to see that they have like these flags over here: show implicit arguments, show implicit conversions and classes, and show inferred types. And so I'm using a multi-command to enable all of them at the same time. Okay, so it overrides the settings only in the workspace file, which is over here. Okay, I'm going to put it down like this, and I want to see the Metals. Where is it? Let's actually close all the others. Let's open Metals again. Metals extension settings. Let's move this one down like this. All right, so if I go here. Okay, so in the settings, I configured it to like when I press it, as you can see, it put them over here, set them all to true, and it says over here that they're modified in the workspace. And I press it again, and they're modified to false. Okay, so let's close this one, Let's go to main. Okay, let's actually go to my settings real quick so that I can show you how I can do this over here. Right, so this is what you need. Okay, so this is an array with only one command. I called it toggle info. In fact, I took it from a friend. Like, he played around with it and he gave it to me. Okay, so these are the ones that you need: toggle implicit conversion and classes, implicit parameters, and show inferred type. So it's gonna run all of them. Okay, so now we're gonna go over here and I actually had to restart it a couple of times. I have no idea why it's so finicky. Okay, so I'm pressing the key binding, and as you can see, a bunch of new stuff. Right, implicit conversions over here, inferred type parameters, and all of that stuff. I'm pressing it again, and all of that goes bye-bye. Really, really cool. All right, that's pretty much what I have for you today. Feel free to check out the change set at your own pace. Also, feel free to fork my template. This is exactly what it was created for. And yeah, I'm going to see you in the next one. For now, as always, it's been Vlad, devinsideyou.com. Don't forget to like this video if you did, subscribe if you want to improve the developer inside you. And if you learned something today, consider support me on GitHub sponsors or Patreon, whatever you prefer. And also watch my videos weeks and sometimes even months before everyone else. And most importantly, take care.